lo and behold, when it was over, and it took me almost 4 hours, and I pressed myself absolutely to the max, to the point where, I was almost delirious, and I got to the finish. My coach looked over at my computer on my handlebars and said, "Bill, your maximum heart rate was 207. That's not supposed to happen for anybody your age. You better go get checked."
I'm Michael George of Sagittarius Healthcare Consulting, and this is the Patient Blog, a new series from the Pioneering Patient podcast channel. In the vlog, we'll look at patients as they go through the process of taking on the challenge of their health conditions. My guest today is a former pro-cyclist and coach, and at the age of 82 in a few weeks' time, he'll be taking on the legendary Tour de France challenge of Mont Ventoux. Moreover, he's doing this just 9 months after undergoing heart valve surgery, open heart valve surgery. Normally, we say that it takes 12 months to recover from that. So let's see how he's taken on this challenge. I welcome to the podcast my guest, Bill Humphreys from Connecticut.
Hello, thank you. Nice to be here.
And it's good to have you on the podcast. So tell me, you're a pro cyclist, and it's a funny way in which you became a pro cyclist, because you seem to have done everything a bit late in life. You took it on about the age of 26, 27, but not because of cycling, but because you didn't want to lose your driving license. So tell us more about that, Bill.
Well, yeah, I was just, I had no direction in life. I was just hanging out in a party town on a beach in San Diego when the tickets started arriving in the mail, and I had a court date, and I realized this is getting serious, and I didn't want to lose my license because it had my ID, my address, and I was a resident, and I didn't want to seem like a transient, which was popular at the time. And when I went before the judge and he threatened me, I said, "Well, I'm taking no chances here. I'm going to sell my car and buy a bicycle. That way I will not lose my license, and I won't get hassled by the police for being a vagrant." So that was the impetus. I had no idea that 55 years later, I would still be riding a bike. I mean, and have the career that I had.
So you started on your bike and you cycled across the US, didn't you, and learned more about cycling in that process.
Yes. Yeah, I rode, I looked around the place, South Mission Beach, San Diego, where I just went back to for a book signing 55 years later. And I realized that the boys were partying pretty hard, and that they were serious partiers, and I better get out of there. And the only way I could afford to get out of town was on my bike. I had tried racing, but I hadn't done well, and I just said, I still want to make a statement with my bike, and what bigger statement can I make if I'm not racing than to ride across America? And that trip turned out to get me very strong and reinforce my confidence, and the very next year I started racing in the springtime in the East Coast, which I didn't know bike racing even existed there because of the weather. And I started learning how to really race and the strategy in the New Jersey, northeast part of the country. And one thing led to another, and the next thing I know, I was selected for the Tour of Ireland and then riding on the World's Championships.
Wow. So a big development at a relatively late age in life, or for pro cycling anyway. So, but we're going to hear more about your varied career as we go through. We have a follow-up podcast, and of course, people can find out more in your books, What If, Volume 1 and Volume 2, which we'll talk about in due course. But let's come to your health condition. You first realized there was a problem with your health when you were on the World Gravel Tour Championships in, I think it was Belgium, and you were at the age of 80 there, and you found that you had a problem then. This is when you first realized that there might be an issue with your heart.
Yes, I was training. I decided to qualify for the Gravel World's Championships, and because they were in Belgium, and I was 80, and I knew I had a good chance of medaling because there weren't going to be a lot of guys there that age, and you still had to ride the full 52 miles. They didn't give us a break. Yeah. So training for it, I realized in my normal training group rides on Wednesdays and Sundays, my pulse was too high. I wasn't able to stay in the group, and it was very discouraging. I mean, I knew I was getting older, and I knew there was not many 80-year-old guys on the group rides. Most guys were 65 to 70. But all of a sudden I said, you know, I'm not happy with this, and I can't figure it out. I'm able to go, but my pulse rate is just too high. And it was bothersome, but I ended up riding up Mount Washington, which is a very steep, brutal climb here in the northeastern United States. And that's when I was fortunate to get through that and not have a heart issue. And when I recovered, I went over to Belgium and I trained. I'd done a lot of training, but I still didn't feel like I was as fit as I should be. And lo and behold, when it was over, and it took me almost 4 hours, and I pressed myself absolutely to the max, to the point where, you know, I was almost delirious. And I got to the finish. My coach looked over at my computer on my handlebars and said, "Bill, your maximum heart rate was 207. That's not supposed to happen for anybody your age. You better go get checked."
Yeah.
And so then shortly after that, some of my teammates, all in their 70s, started having heart issues, and they're still active riders, you know, like a lot of old timers. They don't ride. And that's when I really said, wait a minute. My buddies who are younger and more fit than I am are having open heart surgeries. I definitely got to get checked out. So that was the impetus right there.
And so I think you said at the time you were totally exhausted doing these rides, even though you consider yourself to be fit. So what was the diagnosis you were given when you finally went to see your cardiologist?
Well, it took until I had to change cardiologists and get and when I went in, I said, "You got to find something wrong with me. You got to test me." And they found something in a heartbeat. They just found a murmur. They said, "That's all we need to find. Now we can test you." And it came back in a computer readout on a Friday afternoon, in which I was scheduled to leave the next day to go ride up Mount Washington again. This is a year later. And I read the thing and I said, geez, that doesn't look real good. I couldn't interpret it totally, and I didn't really want to. I was still in denial, even though I had demanded that. So I called, and I finally got somebody on the phone, and I said, listen, you know, I'm supposed to go. And they said that it's serious. You can still ride your bike until we get you back in here for more tests, but you shouldn't ride up Mount Washington. You should probably keep your heart rate, you know, somewhat reasonable, maybe below 140, 120, and ride your bike until we get you in here. And that's when that's when it started to really sink in. And then I go to another cardiologist for preview to interpret it, and she interpreted it and said, you know, it's our aortic stenosis, and it looks like you're going to probably need a heart valve. And then it went on from there.
And so actually this was more serious than just a heart valve, wasn't it? Because I think if you'd have tried to climb Mount Washington, it could have been fatal, couldn't it?
Yes, yeah, there's no doubt. I was pushing blood through the valve, which was, you know, corroded and had so forth. And when I met the surgeon, he knew my athletic background, and he was amazed that I was able to do Mount Washington the year before and the World's Championships because of how much blockage was there. And then he found more blockage in the aortic pulmonary area. And that's when he said, we have got to open you up. We've got to do the heart valve, and we've got to correct this blockage. But he was astounded that I was sitting there right in front of him. And had been able to push myself that hard, and the heart still worked, but even though it was
and it's because you had a second problem, the aortic and pulmonary blockage, that you couldn't have minimally invasive procedure. You had to have surgery, wasn't it?
Yes, and at that point he said, we're going to do this next week, and I said, well, the sooner the better. And but you know, you're pretty nervous when the head surgeon for the hospital is talking to you, and
Yeah.
and then he says, you know, Bill, we know that you're not your normal 81-year-old, you know, on your way to assisted living with a walker. We know that. We know you're an athlete. We know you want to continue to be an athlete. So we're going to treat you like a 41-year-old athlete. And I'm going to go in there with every tool in my pocket I have, and we're going to get you 10 to 12 more active years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to me, I mean, you can't ask for more validation than that.
Exactly. And during this period, as you, over the year, as you try and wait for the diagnosis and as you were told the things about the state of your blockage, what were you going through mentally? It must have been quite tough. You must have been concerned.
But yeah, you know, like, yeah, it was very concerning, and I was trying to get trying to maintain, you know, not being too nervous and get a grip on the anxiety. But yeah, you know, the thought of opening up your heart, I mean, that's huge, you know. I mean, that's and yeah, that all played into you know, my mind, and I as an athlete, I just wasn't going to let it, and I just practiced whatever I'd learned about getting up for the bike race and being positive, and I just put that to use to keep myself together.
And so you were in hospital, you had your surgery. I think you came out after 5 days. And then that's when you really start recovering once you get home. What was that like? You know, had to go through that process. I think you can't recover on your own. You need someone. I think your wife played a part. So tell us all about that recovery process from 5 days
Well, yeah,
onwards.
yeah. I mean, you know, when I went into the surgery, and everybody in that room is so busy. Everybody, there's 15 people in that room where they're going to open you up, and they're all busy. They're all doing stuff, and someone's shaving you, someone's talking to you. There's a lot of activity in the room, and I just said, okay, as soon as I'm out, I'm out, you know. And they put me out, and I woke up about 4 a.m. and in the recovery room, and I just smiled and said, it's over, you know, it's behind me. What's
Yeah.
let's get going. You know, it's going to be painful, but it's over. And the 5 days was tough. And you know, I won't kid you. I mean, I had, you know, a lot of support from my wife and friends stopping by to see me. Friends, I got high school cronies that we still keep in touch that are not athletic at all, who are totally out of shape, and they're coming to visit me, and they're cracking up. They're like, who would ever believe in a million years that we would be standing here looking at you in bed?
Yeah.
You know, like,
Yeah.
what's wrong
Yeah.
with this picture, you know? And so I had to explain to them, you know, athletes put more stress on their hearts than you guys do, you know?
Yeah.
And if you were like me and you played both ends of the party, you know, and maybe you partied a little bit while you were stressing your heart, then, you know, you end up like me. And I'm fortunate that my heart was strong because I had pressed it in both directions, that it got me through. But yeah, you know, it's not normal. So you have a lot of explaining to do, and that you're an athlete and bike riding is good for you. Then what the hell are you doing in here, you know?
Yeah. 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 So how long was it before you got to sort of even start walking again? What was that
Well,
like when you?
yeah, you get home, you know, you start walking up and down the halls of the hospital with the nurse or with a walker, and then you get your confidence back, and you walk a little bit further, and you walk a couple times a day, and then when you get home, you know, you're not going to go outside, but you're walking back and forth. And I live in a small house. And finally, it was a big deal to walk down the dirt road to the mailbox and back. You know, I mean, that's what you're
Yeah.
given. You go with it, and you start working in your mind. Okay, it's October. He said I can't be on the bike again until, you know, 7 or 8 weeks, and then I got to start on a trainer. And so you start doing the math, like an old bike rider, any bike rider who's still riding will do. Like, okay, where am I going to be in March and April? Well, you know, and you know, and I looked at and I said, okay, I could probably be So I was already planning, okay, and I was determined to come back, and that's, then the Miles thing where he called me, that came into.
Yes. So let's talk about this, because you'd started doing a little bit of cycling, then you get real motivation when someone you used to coach, Miles Washburn, contacted you and said they were going to take on a challenge, and they'd gone through their own challenge. So you both had health challenges which you were taking on at the same time by coincidence. So tell me more about that call with
Yes.
Miles.
Yeah, I mean, he called me just before I went in for surgery, and he said, "Hey, coach, I coached him 40 years ago when he was a 17-year-old kid, and he had a lot of promise, and he did virtually everything I said. He's one of those dream kids, like you tell them what to do, and they actually do it. You know what I mean? You give me a kid like that, and I'm going to make him a star. And
Yeah.
and he had a lot of talent, and then we ended up getting separated and going our different ways. I got him off to college, and then but we kept in touch periodically over the years. I knew he was a successful businessman. I knew he was playing golf. I knew he wasn't riding his bike, but he would check in with me every year or two. So when it rang this time, I said, "Hey, Miles." He goes, "Hey, coach." He said, and he told me the story real quickly about the Guillain-Barré syndrome and how it afflicted him, and how he was out, and how he wanted to get back on the bike and raise funds for this foundation, and he wanted to ride up Mount Ventoux next August, and he wanted me to be his coach. And
Yeah.
it's been 40 years, so that was the call that inspired me, and I just said to him,
Yeah.
"I need a goal. I'll coach you if you let me ride up the mountain with you." And he said, "You're on," and that's been my inspiration ever since.
Yeah. So as you say, it's going to be August, and you're taking on the challenge for the Guillain-Barré syndrome. That's what Miles had, and we'll talk to Miles separately about that. But tell the viewers, for those who don't know what Mont Ventoux is and the history of the Tour de France, tell me how important, how legendary that is. Why is that so important, and how tough is it as well?
Well, there's 3 or 4 different routes that go up to the top, and we're not taking the Tour de France one. We're taking any one you take is hard, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a monument, and it's to win that, and Alpe d'Huez. Those are the 2 most famous climbs, and maybe the Tourmalet and the Calapiere. But it's historically, the tour has been going on for over 100 years, and about every 3 or 4 years, the Ventoux is in the race, and it's not on the schedule every year, but every 3 or 4 years it's there, and whoever wins it, it's usually a determining factor in the overall ratings, and it's legendary. Legendary. It's about, the altitude is not that high, but the steepness, and when you get above the tree line, it's just like a moonscape, and you're totally exposed, and it can be really hot there in the summer. It's not like you're in the Alps, but also the weather can turn at that altitude and be miserable at the same time. So
Yeah. And there's also the wind can come. The Mistral, I think, is a big factor in the Mont Ventoux as well.
so I've been studying it, and of course, Miles has ridden it virtually a bunch of times, so
Yeah.
he's chaping at the bit. He's ready. He can go up it tomorrow, but I still have about 5 weeks of which I got to fine tune myself to get up it.
Exactly. So that's my next question. So you're 5, 6 weeks to go before you leave for France. How are the preparations going? What are you doing to get to that standard?
Well, I've been enjoying riding. I finally got to the point where, okay, it's time now. And I told Miles when he wanted me to coach him, I said, I am not up to date on all the wattage, all the programs, all the recovery, all your heart rate. I'm old school, and I don't have all that new technology, even though I use some of it on my computer. I said, and he said, "Coach, I don't care. You were my coach then. You were the best." We went into that whole routine, and he said, "I want you to coach me. You'll do just fine." And so now it's up to the coach to try to remember how I can get fit at the last minute here.
Yeah.
So I'm doing the hills, and I've connected with my coach who reads my computer readout and tells me how to recover for the next day, and I'm doing steep climbs. Yesterday, 14% is the
Yeah.
gradient.
Wow.
And I found a couple of those near me, and I went up them for the first time in a couple of years. And I got to get to the point where I go up and down that same gradient 4 or 5 times in one day, and then I'll be ready. So
Yeah.
I got work to do.
And you feel confident you can do it? I mean, you're the full pro cyclist.
Yeah, and it's 82. It's like I've had open heart surgery. It's like I'm going to Mount Ventoux. It's like you can't have a bad day. You can't get grumpy. You can't. You wake up grateful that you're waking up. You're on the bike riding these beautiful country roads where I've been riding for 55 years. You're going up like I was the other day. I'm there. You idiot. You still have a chance. You still can be out here. You got buddies that are no longer around, that can't get out of their car, that need a walker, and you're out here riding your bike and getting ready for Ventoux, and you got no complaints. You are gifted.
It's almost like it's given you an extra lease of life coming back from the surgery, the chance to do this.
It is. It's, you don't have to do this to come back. You just going out for a 50-mile ride is enough. And some days I feel like I'm going to church when I go on these rides and the tree-covered roads, and I'm still descending at 45 and 50 miles an hour, and I'm going, look at you, you're freaking 82. You're not even worried. You still have the skills. You're taking this corners. Life is just too good, and you get a second chance. It's a very special time. It really is.
Excellent. So Bill, thanks for talking to us now. We will be talking to you again as we go closer. We'll be bringing in Miles and find out more about the Guillain-Barré Syndrome Foundation and the work that's been done for that, and the significant amounts of money that have been raised. It's a great fundraiser, so we'll hear more about that from you too. So thank you for that. We look forward to speaking to you again, Bill. Thank you to you all for watching. Do tune in again for the following episodes with Bill and Miles as we go forward. Please remember to like and subscribe this edition and the Pioneering Patient podcast, and otherwise please remember to take good care of your health.